US intelligence sources say around a fifth of Russian ground forces have pulled back from around Kyiv. But the city is still open to missile and artillery attack. And this is what skepticism looks like, Kyiv style. The beloved statue of Queen Oleg on Mikhailivska Square being sandbagged. But the Russians are retreating, we said. Why bother with all this?
У світі взагалі досі вірить. Хто? Недалекі політики, держави, які знаходяться в залежності від Росії. А ми ніколи не вірили, розумієте? Ніколи Україна не вірила.
Їм віри нема. Вони казали, що нападати не будуть. Але все зробили навпаки.
12 miles northwest of Kyiv, the once agreeable commuter town of Irpin. For several weeks now, a focus of Mr. Putin's special military operation, also known as his failure to take the capital of Ukraine. Dead and alive, the civilian victims have been slowly emerging from its rubble day after day after day. Now it is a largely silent warscape of destruction. As shells rain in, children shelter under a flyover for cars long gone, awaiting evacuation. North of Irpin itself, Ukrainian soldiers patrol villages abandoned by the Russians, who left to... Safety of sorts, escapees from the hell of Irpin finally reached the suburbs this morning of the capital and a reception centre for onward travel. Finally got out with his elderly parents. They'd like to stay in Kyiv. To them, this is tranquility itself after Irpin.
Debris. It's broken. I won't say completely, but mostly. It's extremely dangerous. It's, see, those say high caliber guns, howitzers. See?
Howitzers, shells, artillery, yes.
They shell and shell permanently, day after day, repeatedly, permanently, days and nights. And that was absolutely...
On the streets of Irpin, he met the Russian army face to face and survived. Just.
That glance from him, that was the beast, the glance of a beast. See? I understand them. They are fighting. They were killing. They had been killing.
He says one fired shots in the ground next to him and they stole his mobile phone. To each a destination according to experience. So fleeing to Spain, Larisa Hlushko, but leaving her mother and a son in the army. Spirit and optimism, the Kyiv way.
Well, another attempt is underway to get thousands of civilians out from the living hell in Mariupol, as Ukraine said Russian forces had slowed a humanitarian convoy from getting through. At the same time, Moscow has been issuing more threats to the West. Vladimir Putin warning what he called unfriendly countries that they must pay for gas imports in Russian rubles or supplies would be cut altogether. Jonathan Rugman reports.
It's hard to believe any people still live here in Mariupol, let alone an estimated 170,000 of them. The mayor claims almost 5,000 are now dead. Whatever the truth, one man lies buried in a patch of ground outside his apartment block. His friend says he was shot in the throat as they were out driving together, and that he died 5 minutes later. This is a city where the only daily commute is for drinking water, and where the choice is a stark one. Either wait for the Russians to let them leave, or hunker down for the duration of Vladimir Putin's war. With no gas to cook with, Victor throws what he has into a pot close to his nearest bomb shelter. A bit of cabbage, he says, some potatoes, beetroot and tomato paste. And this man, Mikhail Mizintsev, could decide his fate. He's the Russian general in charge of this siege, who was sanctioned by the British government today. Russia's version of this war avoids the suffering on the ground, preferring to show attack helicopters in blue skies without a wrecked building in sight. But none of this can mask several awkward truths: that there's been no quick victory for Vladimir Putin, who underestimated Ukrainian resistance and Western sanctions with it. And today the Russian leader, looking isolated as usual, retaliated, according to a vaguely reliable poll. Western intelligence agencies are deliberately upping their counter-narrative in response, hoping to puncture the president's feel-good,
sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft.
But we've also seen this, the destruction of Mariupol, directed by the same Russian general who led the ruination of Aleppo in Syria. This, a city Vladimir Putin wants so badly that he's prepared to destroy it, with ever giving it back hardly seeming like an option.
Now, before the war broke out back in January, our reporter Porrick O'Brien was in Mariupol, where he spent time filming with two teachers at a local elementary school in the east of the city. Since then, as the city has been reduced to ruins, he's been trying to find out what happened to them both.
Діти, що ми робимо, якщо пролунав обстріл? Будь ласка.
Треба сідати під парти.
Добре.
On the 25th of January this year, a month exactly before this war started, we visited school number 5 on the eastern outskirts of Mariupol.
Діти, увага, обстріл!
We filmed with Class 6B as the 12-year-olds were put through drills on what to do in case of shelling.
Ходити до роботи було дуже важко.
We interviewed two teachers, Svetlana, the head, and Ludmila, in charge of the primary school. You can tell a surprising amount about pride in profession by the way people introduce themselves.
Мене звати Кальсіна Світлана, я працюю директором комунального закладу, спеціалізована школа перших-третіх ступенів номер 5 з поглибленим вивченням окремих предметів.
А я Семерня Людмила, вчитель початкових класів.
At the time, Svetlana and Ludmila didn't really think that a full-scale war was on its way to them. 7 years before, the neighborhood and the school had been shelled. And lightning doesn't strike twice, right? Mariupol before, and Mariupol 2 weeks ago. This drone footage shows what's left of District East, where the school is. The area not far from Donbass was one of the first parts of the city the Russian army moved into at the beginning of March. Back in January, we asked the teachers this question.
I just wonder if Russian tanks, God forbid, rolled down the street tomorrow, how would this neighborhood react, and how would you react?
Залишилися, поруч би стояла, залишилися би.
Ми у 15-му році не покинули цю школу, і зараз не покинемо це.
Тут наші діти,
наша сім'я.
Наша сім'я, наша робота. Крім нас ніхто не зробить.
Отак би взялися за руки і стали би перед танками, да?
For 2 weeks now, we've been trying to find out what happened to Svetlana and Ludmila. It's been difficult because telephone networks in the city were targeted by the Russians at the beginning of the offensive. This is the automated answer you now get when trying to ring a telephone number there.
Нападением фашистской России на Украину и ведением войны данный звонок заблокирован. Российский звонок пошел.
As friends and colleagues of the teachers escaped the city and moved to areas with network coverage, we started to connect with people. Via social media, we finally did manage to communicate.
On the story of one teacher in Mariupol. Well, earlier I spoke to Nadia Navka, who has spent her whole life in Mariupol. Like many others, she had gone to the drama theatre in the city for shelter. On the 16th of March, she was in the kitchen there making bread with her husband when it was hit. Ukraine believes up to 300 people died there. The couple are now safely out of the area, and it's important testimony because the Russians have repeatedly claimed there were no civilians in that theatre and that it was being used by the Ukrainian military. In a city almost totally destroyed, the bombing of the theatre in Mariupol is one of the most shocking moments of the war and possibly the most deadly. Nadia Navka and her husband joined those taking shelter there on March the 6th, when their home was destroyed.
Когда мы туда попали, нас было около 600. Потом разрасталась эта цифра каждый день, все больше и больше подвозилось людей. Кто-то сам приходил, кого-то привозили с разгромленных, разбомбленных домов.